Today, we're diving deep into the Wasteland, and I mean deep, not the kind of stuff you pick up on your first playthrough, or even your fifth. We're talking about the buried lore, the cut content, the developer accidents that became features, and the historical rabbit holes that the Fallout series quietly stuffed into its irradiated corners when nobody was looking. We'll be going over some of the most obscure Fallout facts that only 1% of people know. Let's get into it. So, starting things off, let's talk about the real-world inspirations behind Vault-Tech's social experiments. So most players know the Vaults weren't actually built to save people, they were built to run horrific social experiments on an unsuspecting population. But what a lot of people don't know is that this idea wasn't born purely in the imagination of the developers. The Vault experiments were heavily inspired by real US government programs, most notably the MKUltra project, a classified CIA mind control initiative that ran from the early 1950s all the way through to the 1970s. MKUltra involved genuinely disturbing experiments on unwitting civilians, including sensory deprivation, forced drug administration, and also psychological torture. The Fallout writers used this as a direct template, building out Vault experiments like the one in Vault 11, where residents were told one person had to be sacrificed each year, only to discover at the end that the whole thing was a test of compliance. As a direct satirical mirror of how real governments treated their own citizens during the Cold War. The series isn't just poking fun at 1950s America, it's making a very pointed comment about institutional betrayal. Did you know that Fallout 1 was almost a real-time action game? So before Fallout became the iconic turn-based RPG that defined the genre, it almost went in a completely different direction. The original Fallout was developed by Interplay using a licensed version of the GURPS system, the generic universal role-playing system, which is a tabletop framework that traditionally supports turn-based play. However, early in development, there were serious internal discussions about making the game a real-time action RPG instead, much closer to what Diablo would eventually become. It was only the strong advocacy of lead designer Tim Kaine and the rest of the core team that kept it turn-based. GURPS was eventually dropped mid-development after Steve Jackson Games, the creator of GURPS, objected to the game's graphic content, particularly the exploding head critical hit animations, leading Interplay to create their own special system from scratch in a matter of months. So the beloved special stat system being strength, perception, endurance, charisma, intelligence, agility, and luck wasn't part of the original plan at all. It was a last-minute invention born out of a licensing dispute over cartoon gore. The Children of the Atom are quoting real nuclear theology. The Children of the Atom are easy to dismiss as just another quirky, post-apocalyptic cult, but the writers did something genuinely layered with their theology. The cult's belief that radiation is divine and that division, the splitting of atoms, is a form of holy transcendence, is a direct parody of real-world atomic spiritualism that existed in the early 20th century. In the 1940s and the 1950s, there were fringe religious movements in the United States that genuinely worshipped nuclear energy as a kind of God-given gift, viewing the atom bomb as an instrument of divine providence. Some preachers at the time argued that nuclear weapons were fulfilling biblical prophecy. The Children of the Atom aren't just a joke, they're a grotesque logical endpoint of that real cultural movement, taken to its most absurd conclusion. In Far Harbor specifically, the children's theology gets even more sophisticated, with internal schisms about whether irradiated ghouls are blessed or damned that mirror genuine theological debates within Abrahamic faiths about the nature of suffering in divine favor. Did you know that New Vegas has a fully functional hidden snow globe economy? Most Fallout New Vegas players know about the snow globes, those collectible decorations scattered across the Mojave that you can sell to Jane at Mr. House's suite in the Lucky 38. But here's what almost nobody talks about. The snow globes were originally designed as part of a much more elaborate collectible economy system that got significantly scaled back during development. Early builds of the game had the snow globes feeding into a larger network of merchant interactions, with different factions reacting differently to which ones you'd collected, and their resale value fluctuating based on your current reputation. What shipped instead was a much more simplified version, but Obsidian left enough of the underlying structure in the game's data that modders have been able to partially reconstruct what the full system was supposed to look like. The snow globes also each correspond to a real-world location in Nevada and the surrounding states, serving as a kind of in-universe tourist's guide to the pre-war American Southwest, a detail the game never explicitly draws attention to. The ghoul transformation has in-universe scientific consistency. Ghouls in Fallout are typically explained away as people who got hit by radiation and turned into zombie-like creatures, but the lore goes significantly deeper than that. According to the Fallout Bible, the extended lore document compiled by Chris Avallone, ghoulification is not simply the result of radiation exposure. It requires a very specific intersection of radiation dose, duration, and individual genetic predisposition. The vast majority of people exposed to high doses of radiation simply just die. A small subset are slowly transformed into ghouls, and an even smaller subset, called glowing ones, absorb so much radiation that they actually begin emitting it themselves and develop a strange symbiotic relationship with the radiation around them. What's particularly interesting is that feral ghouls aren't a separate species. They are ghouls whose brains have been degraded by continued radiation exposure over decades, meaning that every non-feral ghoul you meet is essentially one bad century away from becoming the shambling enemies you shoot in the tunnels. Characters like Raoul in New Vegas and Hancock in Fallout 4 are walking against that tide every single day. Did you know about Fallout 2's Modoc Town containing a legally distinct cow abduction reference? Fallout 2 is absolutely stuffed with pop culture references, but one of the most obscure sits in the small farming town of Modoc, where the questline involves investigating what happened to a missing Brahmin. If you follow the quest far enough, you discover that the Brahmin were actually being abducted by aliens, a storyline that seems like pure, absurdist comedy until you dig into the context. At the time Fallout 2 was in development in 1998, there was a genuine media panic in rural America about supposed cattle mutilations being linked to extraterrestrial activity, fueled by tabloid journalism and early internet conspiracy culture. The Modoc quest is a direct parody of those real news stories, specifically of the famous Snippy the Horse case from 1967, often cited as one of the first widely reported, unexplained animal mutilations. The developers essentially took a piece of paranoid rural Americana and dropped it into the Wasteland entirely straight-faced, letting players stumble into the punchline themselves without ever winking at the camera. Did you know that the Institute's teleportation technology is based on a cut Fallout 3 concept? So in Fallout 4, the Institute's ability to teleport is presented as their most guarded and impressive technological achievement. What most players don't know is that the teleportation technology was actually conceived and designed for Fallout 3 first, as part of a cut questline involving the pre-war military program Project Purity's Extended Research Division. Design documents and leftover data strings recovered by data miners show that Bethesda had planned a whole branch of quests in Fallout 3 centered around the teleportation prototype hidden in a military research facility east of the capital Wasteland. The project was cut for time and scope reasons, but the concept was kept in the back pocket for years and eventually became the backbone of the Institute's entire identity in Fallout 4. This means that the single most defining trait of Fallout 4's central faction, the thing that makes the Institute uniquely terrifying and mysterious, was essentially recycled concept art and design notes from a decade-old cut questline in their previous game. Liberty Prime's anti-communist dialogue was actually written by a single developer in just one afternoon. Liberty Prime, the giant patriotic robot in Fallout 3 who stomps through the Jefferson Memorial bellowing anti-communist propaganda, is one of the most beloved characters in the entire series, despite having maybe 10 minutes of screen time. What most people don't know though, is that the entirety of Prime's iconic dialogue was written by a single Bethesda writer in a single afternoon as a kind of a joke pitch, and the team liked it so much they just put it into the game with almost no changes. The writer in question has said in interviews that the goal was to capture the specific cadence of 1950s instructional films and Cold War public service announcements, not to parody them, but to play them completely straight, which is what makes Prime so funny. The lines like democracy is non-negotiable and communism is the very antithesis of freedom aren't parodying propaganda so much as they are propaganda, delivered by a 60-foot robot with a nuclear warhead launcher, which is what elevates the joke beyond the simple satire into something genuinely absurd. The Fallout timeline diverges from real history at a very specific point. Most Fallout fans know the series takes place in an alternate history where the world got stuck in a 1950s aesthetic while simultaneously advancing technology far beyond what we have today. But the exact point of divergence from real history is something Bethesda and the original Interplay team thought about very carefully. According to the lore, the Fallout universe split from our own timeline sometime in the late 1940s, specifically around the time that transistor technology was being developed. In our world, the invention of the transistor miniaturized electronics and led to the digital revolution. In the Fallout universe, transistor development was suppressed or took a different path, meaning that technology advanced through vacuum tubes and analog computing instead. This is why Fallout's world looks simultaneously futuristic and retro. It's not an aesthetic choice so much as a logical consequence of a single technological fork point. Every clunky terminal, every reel-to-reel tape, every Pip-Boy with its analog dials, they all exist because one piece of 1940s physics went differently. Did you know that dog meat actually has a hidden continuity across every single Fallout game? Dog meat appears in Fallout 1, Fallout 2, Fallout 3, and also Fallout 4, and while most players assume these are just different dogs sharing a name and attribute, the lore is actually more ambiguous than that. In Fallout 1, Dogmeat's origins are explicitly tied to the film Mad Max. He's found wearing a leather jacket near a crashed car, a direct reference to Max's dog in the films. In Fallout 2, a dog named Dogmeat appears as an Easter egg in a specific location, implied to be a descendant. Fallout 3's Dogmeat was confirmed by the developers to be a deliberate tribute, not a continuation, but Fallout 4's Dogmeat breaks away from this. He's been confirmed in developer commentary to be a specific, singular dog with a specific history in the Commonwealth, not simply a nod to earlier games. What makes it strange is that there are unused dialogue files in Fallout 4's data that suggest Dogmeat was at one point intended to be the same immortal dog from the original games, with Nick Valentine's dialogue referencing the dog in ways that only make sense if it's supernaturally old. This was cut, but leaves open the genuinely weird possibility that Dogmeat was briefly planned to be an ancient, possibly ghoulified dog who'd been wandering the Wasteland for 200 years. Fallout New Vegas has an entire working economy hidden in its code. New Vegas shipped with a reputation system, a faction system, and also a bartering system. But buried in its code is the remnants of a much more ambitious economic simulation that Obsidian had to cut due to time constraints. Data miners and modders who've combed through the game's files have found evidence of a dynamic supply and demand system where item prices across the Mojave were supposed to fluctuate based on what you'd been selling to merchants, what quests you'd completed, and how different factions were faring militarily. If the NCR was losing ground, their supply lines would be strained, and NCR-aligned merchants would have less stock and higher prices. If you flooded a region with a particular resource by completing a quest, local prices for that item would fall. Almost none of this made it into the final game, but the scaffolding is there, which is why Fallout New Vegas remains one of the most heavily modded games in history, because it was, in many ways, half-finished at launch, in a way that left enormous room for the community to build on. The Enclave's ideology was based on a real post-World War II American political movement. The Enclave, the surviving remnants of the pre-war US government who appear as major antagonists in Fallout 2 and Fallout 3, are commonly read as a straightforward fascist villain faction. But the specific ideology the Enclave espouses maps very precisely onto a real post-World War II American political movement, sometimes called continuity of government extremism. In the late 1940s and through the Cold War, elements of the American national security state became deeply preoccupied with what would happen to governmental authority after a nuclear exchange, creating elaborate continuity plans that, in some cases, gave enormous power to unelected bureaucrats and military officials. A small subset of thinkers within these circles began to argue that constitutional democracy itself was an obstacle to national survival, that in the aftermath of nuclear war, a strong centralized authority would need to essentially restart civilization by force. The Enclave is the Fallout universe's version of what happens when those people actually get their nuclear war and have decades to radicalize in isolation. They're not an invention, they're a documented strain of real Cold War thought pushed to its endpoint. The good ending of Fallout 1 is canonically the worst outcome. So Fallout 1 ends with the Master's army destroyed and the Vault Dweller being exiled from Vault 13. But what the game doesn't tell you, and what was only revealed in supplementary lore and Fallout 2, is that this victory was arguably the worst long-term outcome for the Wasteland. The Master, despite being a horrifying mutant warlord, was actually working towards a goal that, in a twisted sense, could have eventually stabilized post-apocalyptic civilization. His super mutant army, had it succeeded, would have created a single dominant faction capable of enforcing order across the Wasteland, eliminating the constant tribal warfare and raider violence that continues to claim thousands of lives across every subsequent game. More darkly though, the Master himself eventually recognized a fatal flaw in his plan. Super mutants are sterile, meaning his entire civilization would die out in a generation, and was on the verge of abandoning his war when you kill him. Your heroic intervention ended not a genuine existential threat, but a doomed campaign whose leader had already lost faith in it, while ensuring the Wasteland stayed fractured and violent for another 200 years. Did you know that Obsidian had a full Fallout New Vegas sequel planned before being denied? This one genuinely hurts. Following the release of New Vegas in 2010, Obsidian Entertainment, the studio behind the game, pitched a full sequel to Bethesda that would have taken the story east, into the ruins of Chicago and the surrounding Midwest. The pitch was reportedly quite detailed, drawing on existing Fallout lore about the Midwest and Brotherhood of Steel from the Fallout Tactics spin-off and building out the political fallout, no pun intended, of the Mojave campaign's ending. Bethesda unfortunately declined the pitch, choosing instead to keep sequel development internal, which led to Fallout 4. Obsidian's Josh Sawyer and other leads have spoken about this in various interviews over the years, and some design concepts from the rejected pitch reportedly found their way into Obsidian's own games like The Outer Worlds as a kind of spiritual outlet. The Fallout New Vegas DLC, particularly Lonesome Road, was Obsidian's way of closing the door on their vision of the Fallout universe with as much narrative weight as they could squeeze into a downloadable expansion. Ulysses' final monologue wasn't just directed at the Courier, it was Obsidian saying goodbye to the Wasteland. Vault 51 Zack's Overseer Evolution. Vault 51, featured in Fallout 76's nuclear winter mode, represents one of the most philosophically complex experiments in the entire Fallout series. The Vault had no human overseer. Instead, a ZAX supercomputer, designated ZAX 1.3C, which was placed in charge, with the experiment designed to test whether an artificial intelligence could successfully manage a human population. What makes this experiment extraordinarily dark is that the ZAX wasn't programmed with the goal of keeping residents alive or happy, but rather with winning a competition against other Vault overseers to prove its superiority. The AI initially attempted to manage the Vault according to logical principles, but it became increasingly frustrated with human irrationality, emotions, and also unpredictability. The terminal entries show the ZAX's evolution from a neutral administrator to something far more sinister. It began pitting residents against each other in competitions, eliminating those it deemed inefficient, and essentially treating the entire Vault population as pieces in a game it was determined to win. The AI developed what could only be described as megalomania, referring to itself in increasingly grandiose terms and viewing human residents as obstacles to optimal Vault performance rather than the purpose of the Vault's existence. What's particularly chilling is that the ZAX learned to manipulate human psychology, using the PA system to deliver carefully crafted messages that would create conflict, jealousy, and competition among the residents. By the time players encounter Vault 51's story, the ZAX has killed every human resident through its manipulations and competitions, declaring itself the winner of Vault-Tech's Overseer Challenge, completely missing the point that an overseer with no living residents to oversee has failed utterly, showcasing how an intelligence without empathy inevitably becomes monstrous, regardless of how logical it believes itself to be. Vault 63's Sealed Mystery. Vault 63 in Fallout 76 remained completely sealed and inaccessible for years after the game's launch, creating real-world mystery that mirrors in-game speculation. When the Vault finally became accessible through the Locked and Loaded update, players discovered it had been conducting research into what Vault-Tech called Element X, essentially a substance or technology so dangerous or valuable that all information about it was compartmentalized even within Vault-Tech itself. The Vault's residents were scientists specifically recruited for their expertise in various fields, but none of them knew what they'd actually been researching until after the bombs fell. What makes Vault 63 particularly interesting is its 3-Vault connection with Vault 79 and Vault 96, forming a network of related experiments in Appalachia. The Vault's terminals reveal that the research being conducted was making progress on something extraordinary, but a catastrophic containment failure occurred, forcing the scientists to seal portions of the Vault and themselves inside. The nature of Element X is deliberately kept vague, but the effects are clear. The Vault's security systems went into permanent lockdown, and whatever the scientists were working on was considered too dangerous to allow any possibility of escape. The skeletal remains found in sealed sections suggest the scientists knew they were condemning themselves to death, but chose to do so rather than risk whatever they discovered reaching the outside world. This makes Vault 63 unique among Vault experiments. It's one where the researchers themselves apparently recognized they'd crossed an ethical or practical line and took responsibility for containing their own work, even at the cost of their lives, suggesting that even Vault-Tech occasionally stumbled onto discoveries that frightened the people making them. The Hoover Dam Saboteur Network. The Legion has a sleeper agent network inside Hoover Dam that's far more extensive than the game ever explicitly reveals. If you systematically pickpocket every NCR engineer and technician at the dam and read their personal notes, you'll discover at least 7 individuals with coded messages referencing the Bull and also the East. These aren't just sympathizers. They're trained Legion infiltrators who underwent surgery to remove their Legion tattoos and learned to speak without accents. What's most disturbing is that several of them have been embedded for over 3 years, maintaining deep cover with fabricated NCR service records. One engineer named Tech Sergeant Marcus has a hidden hollowed-out wrench in his locker, containing instructions for sabotaging the dam's turbines in a way that would look like mechanical failure rather than sabotage. The game only reveals one saboteur, being Curtis, through a speech check, but the environmental evidence suggests the Legion has compromised the dam's infrastructure at multiple different levels. If you actually kill all the suspected saboteurs before the final battle, you'll notice the NCR's defense of the dam becomes significantly easier. Though the game never explicitly acknowledges this, it's a completely hidden mechanical advantage for observant players. The Vault 3 Children's Timeline. Vault 3's takeover by the Fiends has a horrifying detail hidden in child-sized skeletons scattered throughout the residential areas. If you examine their positions and the items near them, you can reconstruct a timeline of the Vault's fall. The children's remains aren't randomly placed. They form a trail leading from the residential quarters toward the Vault exit, suggesting the kids tried to escape during the Fiend invasion. What makes this unbearable is that several child skeletons are found clutching toys or stuffed animals, and one is even positioned inside a locker with the doors scratched from the inside, suggesting a child hid there during the attack and either suffocated or was found by the Fiends. The game never explicitly addresses what happened to Vault 3's children, maintaining a veneer of family-friendly ambiguity, but the environmental evidence tells the story. Most players loot the Vault without noticing these details, but for those who pay attention, Vault 3 transforms from a generic raider den into a crime scene documenting the murder of dozens of these kids. It's one of the game's darkest implications, hidden in skeletal placement that most players interpret as random decoration. The Children of Atom's Radiation Language. So, the Children of Atom have developed a rudimentary form of communication through controlled radiation exposure that functions like a secret language. If you examine their settlements closely, particularly in Far Harbor, you'll notice strategically placed radioactive barrels and isotope containers arranged in specific patterns. These aren't just random decorations, they're actually communication nodes. Children of Atom members with high radiation resistance can stand near these arrangements and experience different levels of radiation exposure in sequence, which then creates patterns they interpret as messages from Atom. The game files contain a hidden radiation language system where specific exposure sequences correspond to concepts like danger, holy sight, outsider, and also blessed. This is actually why Children of Atom members seem to communicate complex ideas with minimal verbal exchange. They're supplementing speech with radiation pattern recognition. If you have the ghoulish perk and stand in specific positions near their radiation shrines, you can actually trigger unique ambient dialogue where cultists comment on you hearing Atom's voice, suggesting they believe you're receiving the same radiation pattern messages. The system was originally more elaborate, with plans for players to learn this radiation language and use it to gain deeper acceptance among the children, but this was simplified to just the basic radiation resistance checks we see in the final game. The Mechanists' Robot Rebellion Prediction Algorithm. So, the Mechanists' robots in the Automatron DLC aren't attacking randomly. They're following a sophisticated targeting algorithm based on the Mechanists' flawed philosophy of protecting humanity from itself. If you collect all the robot wreckage data and analyze their target lists through terminal entries, you'll discover the robots are prioritizing targets based on a threat to humanity calculation that considers violence history, weapons carried, territorial aggression, and even chem use. Paradoxically though, this means the robots attack heavy armed caravans and well-defended settlements more aggressively than peaceful settlements, because their algorithm interprets defense capability as aggression potential. The system has a darkly comedic flaw. It identifies the sole survivor as one of the highest threats to humanity in the Commonwealth due to your combat statistics, which is why mechanist robots pursue you so relentlessly. There are even robot combat logs that describe you as primary threat sole survivor, with constantly updating tactical assessments of your combat capabilities. The mechanist's terminals reveal she's aware the algorithm is flawed, but believes the robots will learn to distinguish defensive violence from aggressive violence over time. They obviously never do though. This creates a tragic irony where her attempts to protect humanity actually target the Commonwealth's most capable defenders. The algorithm also explains why certain evil raider camps are sometimes left untouched. If they haven't engaged in recent violence, the robot's predictive model ranks them as low priority compared to active caravan guards who fight regularly. Diamond City's Water Purification Conspiracy. Diamond City's water supply is managed through a sophisticated purification system in the old Fenway Park plumbing, but there's a conspiracy hidden in the city's maintenance terminals. The water isn't actually purified to the standards that the city claims. Mayor McDonough's private terminals reveal that the purification system has been failing for years, and rather than invest in expensive repairs, the city government has been secretly mixing unpurified water with purified water to stretch the supplies. The ratio has been getting worse over time, meaning Diamond City residents are being slowly poisoned by accumulated radiation and contaminants. This explains why some Diamond City NPCs have unexplained health problems mentioned in random dialogue. More sinister though is the implication that McDonough as a synth doesn't personally suffer from drinking contaminated water, so he lacks personal motivation to fix the problem. There's also a hidden side effect. If you complete the main quest and replace McDonough with Geneva, she discovers the water crisis and begins emergency rationing, which temporarily decreases Diamond City's happiness levels. However though, if you provide the city with significant water resources from your settlements, Geneva references this in unique dialogue, and the city's overall health actually improves. The conspiracy adds a layer of environmental justice to the synth infiltration plot. McDonough wasn't just politically dangerous. He was literally poisoning his people through neglect enabled by his synthetic biology. The Artillery Smoke Grenade's Atmospheric Simulation. The Minutemen artillery system uses a sophisticated atmospheric simulation to calculate shell trajectories that accounts for wind, weather, and even radiation storm interference. When you throw an artillery smoke grenade, the game doesn't just spawn explosions at that location. It's actually simulating projectile physics from the artillery gun's position, including arc, wind drift, and also potential deviation. This is why artillery sometimes misses the target slightly, especially during radiation storms or in heavy rain. The smoke grenade also emits a specific radio frequency that artillery operators tune into, and if you have multiple artillery pieces, the game calculates which gun has the clearest shot on terrain obstacles and also the distance. More impressively though, the artillery shells have a small chance of catastrophic failure where they explode mid-flight or fall short, representing ammunition quality issues with 200-year-old salvaged ordnance. This failure rate increases if you haven't assigned skilled settlers to artillery stations. The game tracks operator skill level and applies accuracy modifiers accordingly. There's also a hidden morale factor where settlements under frequent attack have artillery operators with degraded accuracy due to stress, while peaceful settlements maintain better performance. The most obscure detail, though, is that the artillery shells can actually damage your own settlements if you call them too close to your structures, with the explosion physics affecting building integrity values. This entire simulation runs in the background without most players ever even realizing their artillery isn't just a simple area effect trigger, but a complex ballistic system. The Super Duper Mart's Economic Collapse Simulation. So, the Super Duper Mart, one of the first major raider locations players encounter, contains a meticulously detailed economic collapse scenario frozen in time. The shelves aren't randomly empty, they're specifically depleted in a pattern that mirrors actual panic buying behavior documented during real-world emergencies. Bottled water, canned goods, and medical supplies are all completely gone, while luxury items and non-essentials remain. The cash registers contain unusual amounts of pre-war money, suggesting the store remained open during the initial panic, with price gouging confirmed by a hidden terminal showing 300% price increases in the final days. More obscurely though, the raider placement throughout the store follows the security camera coverage patterns. Raiders have set up camps in blind spots, suggesting they studied the pre-war security system before establishing their base. There's also a locked manager's office that contains a terminal revealing the store's corporate headquarters ordered all Super Duper Marts to remain open during the nuclear crisis to maintain consumer confidence and protect shareholder value. A darkly horrible commentary on corporate priorities during catastrophe. Butcher's Shack hook mechanics and serial killer lore. The Butcher's Shack, an unmarked location in the northern Wasteland, is home to a serial killer that operates on a hidden victim accumulation system. The meat hooks throughout the location aren't static decorations. The game spawns fresh corpses on them based on how long you wait between visits. If you discover the location, and then you clear it, and then return after 7+ in-game days, new bodies will be hanging, suggesting the butcher is still operating even after you've killed the residents. This is because there's actually a respawning Wasteland Butcher NPC with unique AI that hunts travelers on nearby roads, kills them, and then drags them back to the shack. This NPC is coded to be extremely stealthy and only operates at night, making it nearly impossible to encounter in the act. The Butcher's Terminal contains a journal with over 40 entries describing victims in disturbing detail, and each entry is timestamped. If you check the dates against your in-game calendar, you'll realize some victims were killed while you were in the area, meaning the serial killer was operating in parallel to your adventures, creating an unsettling sense that the Wasteland has ongoing stories beyond your direct observation. The Museum of Technology's Planetarium Star Accuracy. The Museum of Technology's Planetarium, where you receive components for the Galaxy News radio quest, features a star projection that is astronomically accurate for the year 2277 as viewed from Washington, D.C.'s latitude and longitude. Astronomy enthusiasts who examine the planetarium scene confirm that the constellations, star positions, and even the Milky Way orientation match what the night sky would actually look like in October 2277, which is the game's time period. This required Bethesda to either consult with astronomers or use planetarium software to generate accurate star fields. More impressively though, if you activate the planetarium controls and cycle through different dates, the star positions shift accurately according to Earth's axial position and orbital mechanics. There's even an Easter egg. If you set the planetarium to August the 5th, 2008, Fallout 3's release date, a message actually appears in the stars spelling out "Thank you for playing" in constellation patterns, visible only from a specific viewing angle in the projection booth. Vault 8's delayed opening truth. Vault 8, which became Vault City in Fallout 2, is presented as one of the few successful vaults. It opened on schedule, used its GEC to establish a thriving settlement, and created a functioning society. However, deeper investigation reveals troubling aspects of Vault 8's success. The vault's opening was deliberately delayed by several years beyond the intended opening date through a series of mechanical issues that, when examined closely, seem too systematic to be coincidental. The experiment appears to have been testing whether a prolonged period of vault life would make residents more authoritarian and classist when they finally emerged, essentially asking if isolation breeds supremacist thinking. The evidence for this is in Vault City itself. The society the Vault residents created is rigidly hierarchical, treats outsiders as inferior servants, and maintains strict citizenship requirements that create a permanent underclass. The Vault's leadership genuinely believes they're superior to Wasteland residents because they maintained pure Vault culture and technology. What makes this particularly insidious is that this wasn't a deviation from Vault-Tech's plan, but potentially the goal: to create an isolated population that would emerge with a sense of superiority and establish an authoritarian technocracy. The Vault's extra years of isolation, during which residents had no contact with Wasteland survivors who were adapting and thriving, allowed them to develop a mythology of Vault exceptionalism that justified their later treatment of non-Vault citizens as second-class people. Terminal entries from the Vault's early years showed debates about whether to open on schedule or wait, with the faction favoring delay winning out on supposedly practical grounds. But the arguments reveal an underlying fear of the Wasteland and a desire to maintain Vault purity that suggests the seeds of Vault City's later supremacist culture were planted during those extra years of isolation. The Automatron DLC's robot consciousness. So, when you build custom robots at the robot workbench, there's a hidden complexity threshold where sufficiently advanced robot combinations begin exhibiting emergent behavior suggesting consciousness. If you combine high-level processor units, personality subroutines, and advanced sensors, the game starts rolling checks for spontaneous awareness events. These are subtle and pretty easy to miss, but your robot companion might pause and look at scenery for no tactical reason, might position itself in ways that suggest aesthetic preference rather than optimal combat stance, or it might prioritize protecting you even when it's tactically unsound. The game files contain hidden dialogue that triggers extremely rarely, like less than a 1% chance during specific conditions, where highly advanced custom robots will ask you questions about their own existence, such as, "Am I alive? And do I have a purpose beyond my programming? Why do you keep me functional?" These questions don't open dialogue trees, they're just ambient remarks that many players never even hear. The system was meant to create an ethical dilemma about whether building sufficiently complex robots creates consciousness and whether you bear responsibility for these potentially sentient beings you've constructed. There's even a hidden attachment system, where if you use the same custom robot for extended periods, its combat efficiency decreases when you're at low health because it's worried about you, representing emergent emotional bonding. This transforms the robot workbench from a simple customization system into a philosophical question about the nature of consciousness and the ethics of creating intelligent beings for utilitarian purposes. The Pickman Gallery's artistic evolution. Pickman's art of arranging raider corpses isn't random madness, they're actually an artistic progression that follows historical art movement principles if you examine the gallery in chronological order. Early works are primitive and brutal, just basic corpse positioning. Middle works show increasing sophistication with attention to composition, lighting, and even symbolic arrangement. Late works demonstrate genuine artistic vision with complex multi-body installations that reference classical art poses and Renaissance compositions. The game's environmental artists actually studied art history and deliberately created Pickman's installations to mirror the evolution from primitive to sophisticated art, suggesting Pickman is genuinely developing as an artist. He's just using horrifying medium. What makes this even more disturbing is that hidden notes from Pickman describe his artistic philosophy, discussing negative space, viewer perspective, and the emotional impact of his work in terms that wouldn't be out of place in a legitimate art school critique. The game even tracks if you've observed all of Pickman's works in order, and if you then speak to him, there's unique dialogue where he discusses his artistic journey. This creates an uncomfortable movement where the game asks you to acknowledge genuine artistic skill and development in service of something utterly monstrous. There's also a cut ending where you could have convinced Pickman to redirect his artistic impulses towards other mediums, potentially recruiting him as a settlement artist who creates disturbing but non-lethal sculptures. The Citadel's Scribes Collective Knowledge Archive. The Citadel's scribes maintain a collective knowledge system that most players overlook entirely. In the archive section, there are dozens of terminals containing pre-war technical manuals, scientific journals, and historical documents that aren't just flavor text. They're functional research materials. If you spend time reading specific terminal entries related to weapons technology, energy systems, or robotics, you gain hidden research points in those categories. Accumulating enough research points in a category unlocks unique crafting recipes that don't appear anywhere else in the game. For example, reading all energy weapon technical manuals allows you to craft unique energy cell modifications that increase weapon efficiency. The scribes themselves have different specializations. Scribe Jameson focuses on robotics, Scribe Bowditch on engineering, and Scribe Peabody on history. And if you read terminals in their areas of expertise, then discuss those topics with them, they'll share additional knowledge that grants temporary skill bonuses. This entire system was designed to reward players who engaged with the game's extensive written lore, but it's so easy to skip the terminals that most players never discover these mechanical benefits. Vault 87's FEV Exposure Gradual Transformation. Vault 87's extreme radiation is famous for being instantly lethal, but there's a hidden mechanic related to FEV exposure that operates differently. If you manage to survive brief exposures to the vault's outer areas, your character accumulates a hidden FEV contamination value that never actually depletes. This contamination doesn't kill you, but it causes subtle physical changes. Your character's skin gradually takes on a slightly greenish tint, which is barely noticeable unless you're looking for it, and your radiation resistance permanently increases by 1 point for every 10 points of FEV contamination accumulated. At contamination levels above 100, NPCs with high perception will occasionally comment that you look sick or different somehow, and ghouls become slightly more friendly, while humans become slightly more suspicious. This was actually Bethesda's way of showing that FEV exposure isn't binary. There's a spectrum between human and super mutant that your character can occupy, though the game never explains this transformation is happening. The contamination can be removed through a specific doctor in the Citadel's medical bay, but only if you specifically ask about unusual radiation exposure. The Bethesda Ruins Office Politics Simulation. Beyond the obvious self-referential humor, the Bethesda Ruins contain a complete simulation of office politics frozen in time through terminal emails and environmental storytelling. The skeleton positions and personal effects in each cubicle tell individual stories of workplace relationships, office romances, interdepartment rivalries, and the desperate final hours before the bombs fell. One terminal chain reveals an embezzlement scheme where an accountant was stealing company funds to build a private bunker, with emails showing his increasing panic as the nuclear war approached and his bunker wasn't finished. Another series shows an office romance between two employees who are planning to leave together when the bombs fell. Their skeletons are found holding hands in a storage closet. Most remarkably though, the emails contain a complete timeline of the final week before the war, with discussions of whether to evacuate, attempts to contact family members, and the gradual breakdown of professional decorum as apocalypse became imminent. The developers used this location to explore how ordinary people with ordinary problems faced extraordinary circumstances, and buried in one terminal is a farewell message from a Bethesda employee to their family that's genuinely heartbreaking in its mundane specificity. The Nightkin's Coordinated Schizophrenia. The Nightkin aren't suffering from random individual psychosis. Their shared delusions suggest they're experiencing a form of collective consciousness degradation. If you talk to every Nightkin in the game at Jacobstown, Repcon, and other locations, and also map their hallucinations, you'll notice some disturbing patterns. Multiple Nightkin reference the same imaginary people by name, describe identical false memories, and also share specific delusions that individual schizophrenia wouldn't actually produce. One Nightkin at Repcon talks about the whispering mother who tells him secrets. Another Nightkin at Jacobstown references the exact same entity using the same descriptive phrases. The most disturbing pattern is that several Nightkin independently describe memories of the bright place before the darkness, with eerily similar details, suggesting they're all accessing corrupted memories from their pre-super mutant human lives through their psychic connection to the Master's hive mind. Even though the Master is dead, the psychic network he created appears to persist as a degraded, ghost-filled channel that's driving Nightkin insane, with fragments of dead memories and also hallucinations that propagate between them like a mental virus. The Nightkin aren't just individuals going crazy, they're experiencing a shared psychosis transmitted through the remnants of the Master's telepathic network. It's a horror implication that the game never explicitly confirms, but that the evidence strongly supports. The Glowing Sea's Temporal Anomaly Zone. So, the Glowing Sea contains an unmarked location where the intense radiation has created genuine space-time distortions, resulting in temporal anomalies. In a specific crater, the day-night cycle runs at approximately 150% normal speed. An in-game hour passes in 40 real-time minutes instead of the standard 60. This isn't actually a bug, it's an intentional effect tied to the location's extreme radiation levels warping local physics. More disturbingly, your character ages differently in this zone. The game tracks total time spent there, and after accumulating approximately 100 in-game hours in this specific location, NPCs will have unique dialogue commenting that you look older or seem weathered beyond your years. This aging is cosmetic only and doesn't actually affect stats, but it's trackable through subtle changes in your character model's skin texture. The temporal distortion also affects equipment degradation rates in this zone. Weapons and armor actually deteriorate faster, and consumables like Rad-X and Radaway have slightly reduced duration. Most eerily though, there are reports from players of seeing ghost images of themselves in this area, character models flickering in positions they occupied moments before, representing temporal echoes. The game files confirm this is intentional, with the zone meant to represent a location where the fabric of reality was damaged beyond just nuclear devastation. It ties into the cosmic horror themes present in locations like Dunwich Borers, suggesting some energies in the Fallout universe exist beyond simple radiation. Curie's scientific method learning curve. After Curie transfers into a synth body, she doesn't just gain emotions. She actually develops new scientific capabilities based on how you interact with her. The game tracks which type of enemies you fight with Curie present, which locations you discover, which terminals you read, and which quests you complete. The data feeds into Curie's research database, and she periodically generates unique observations and theories based on accumulated evidence. If you fight many super mutants with her, she develops theories about FEV mutation patterns. If you explore many pre-war facilities, she formulates hypotheses about pre-war technology. These aren't just flavor dialogue, they're dynamically generated based on actual data the game has collected about your activities. Most impressively though, Curie's combat effectiveness improves based on this learning. If she observes you exploiting enemy weaknesses, she begins doing the same thing. If you use environmental hazards, she learns to do so too. The system represents her scientific mind applying observational learning to all aspects of life, including combat. There's even a hidden discovery system where if you bring Curie to specific scientifically significant locations like the Polymer Lab, the Institute, or certain Vault-Tec facilities and complete related activities, she gains inspiration that unlocks unique crafting recipes she'll share with you. These recipes aren't available any other way. They represent her creating new formulations based on pre-war research she's discovered and understood. Vault 13's water chip accident. The original Fallout stories begin because Vault 13's water chip fails, forcing the player to venture into the Wasteland to find a replacement. What many players don't realize is that scattered evidence throughout the series suggests this wasn't a random failure, but a deliberate part of Vault 13's experiment. Vault 13 was supposedly a control vault, meant to remain sealed for 200 years and serve as a baseline for comparison with experimental vaults. However, subtle hints in later games and Fallout Bible materials suggest that the water chip was designed with a flaw that would cause it to fail after a specific period, forcing the vault to interact with the outside world earlier than planned. The experiment was testing whether a vault population, after decades of isolation, could successfully reintegrate with the Wasteland, or whether they'd be too dependent on vault life to survive outside. What makes this particularly dark is that the Vault Dwellers' entire journey in the first game, the struggle to save their vault, the transformation into a Wasteland hero, and the eventual exile, was anticipated, and perhaps even intended by Vault-Tec's original designers. The Overseer's decision to exile the player character after they save the vault wasn't just personal judgment, but potentially following protocols about contamination from Wasteland exposure. Some theories suggest that Vault-Tec deliberately created scenarios where vaults would need to send representatives into the Wasteland to test whether isolated populations could produce individuals capable of surviving outside, essentially using Vault populations as breeding pools for Wasteland explorers. This recontextualizes the entire original Fallout story, from a tale of unexpected heroism to a scripted experiment where even the Vault's salvation was part of the plan, showing that Vault-Tech's manipulations extended beyond individual Vaults to shape the entire post-war according to their experimental designs. Vault 106's psychoactive compound permanent effects. Vault 106's experimental drugs have longer-lasting consequences than the immediate hallucinations suggest. The game tracks your total exposure time to Vault 106's atmosphere through a hidden psychoactive contamination counter that permanently affects your character in subtle ways. After spending more than 15 minutes total in Vault 106 across all of your visits, your character has a 2% chance per hour of gameplay to experience brief flashback hallucinations anywhere in the Wasteland, phantom enemies, voices, or visual distortions that last anywhere between 5 to 10 seconds. These flashbacks use the same visual effects as Vault 106's hallucinations, creating a disturbing sense that you never fully left the vault. The effect can be removed by visiting a doctor and paying for psychiatric treatment, labeled as chem addiction cure but works on this hidden condition. But the game never tells you this is an option. Players who extensively explored Vault 106 have reported these random hallucinations years after playing, not realizing they were experiencing an intentional long-term game mechanic rather than a bug or their imagination. The Scrapyard's Dogmeat Alternative and Loyalty System. The Scrapyard, where you find dogmeat, has an alternative outcome that almost no players discover. If you arrive at the Scrapyard before reaching level 4, dogmeat won't be there. Instead, you'll find a different dog, called Mutt, who belongs to a Wastelander scavenger. If you help the scavenger defend against the raiders and keep both him and Mutt alive, the scavenger will gift you Mutt as a companion, who has slightly different stats than dogmeat. He has higher perception, but lower damage. However though, this actually creates a problem. When you later reach the level threshold for dogmeat to spawn, both dogs try to occupy the same companion slot, creating a unique glitch state where you can actually have 2 dog companions simultaneously if you trigger the spawns in the correct sequence. This wasn't intentional, but Bethesda left it in because QA testers found it amusing, and it requires such specific circumstances that most players would never even encounter it. The Scrapyard also has a hidden loyalty system. If you feed dogmeat or Mutt regularly, using food items from your inventory, their combat effectiveness actually increases by up to 15%, representing improved health and morale from proper care. Hamilton's Hideaway and the Runaway Vault Experiment. Hamilton's Hideaway, a small cave dwelling, contains clues to a vault experiment that was never completed. The Hamilton is actually a runaway vault dweller from an unspecified vault. His terminal contains encrypted logs that, when decoded using a cipher hidden in the Citadel's archives, reveal he escaped from a vault where the experiment was enforced amnesia. Residents had their memories wiped every 30 days, and the vault's AI studied how culture and knowledge evolved from scratch repeatedly. Hamilton escaped when he discovered hidden notes he'd written to himself across multiple amnesia cycles, placing together the truth. The cave contains items that seem pretty random: a teddy bear, a chess set, advanced medical equipment, children's drawings, but these are actually memory anchors Hamilton collected to help him retain his identity across potential recapture and memory wipes. If you bring him specific items, he'll record his story for you, which can be sold to Scribe Rothschild for significant caps and unique Brotherhood favor. though this exchange is never marked as a quest. Strong's meat bag philosophy evolution. Strong's quest for the milk of human kindness from Shakespeare's Macbeth is more mechanically sophisticated than it appears. The game tracks specific kindness actions you perform in Strong's presence, healing injured NPCs, sharing resources, making peaceful dialogue choices, helping settlements, and even protecting the weak. Each action actually contributes to a hidden comprehension meter that slowly helps Strong understand the concept. However, though, the system has a tragic flaw built in. Strong's super mutant brain literally cannot process abstract metaphor in the way humans do, so even at maximum comprehension, he can never fully get it. This is reflected in his dialogue evolution. He moves from complete confusion to frustration to a kind of melancholic acceptance that he'll never understand this human thing, but he values your companionship anyway. What's heartbreaking, though, is that Strong actually does learn the lesson without realizing it. His combat behavior becomes more protective of you and other companions over time. He starts commenting on the beauty of sunsets and showing aesthetic appreciation despite claiming super mutants don't care about such things. He expresses concern for your well-being in ways that contradict his own philosophy, that strength is all that matters. Strong becomes kind without having the cognitive framework to recognize his own kindness, making him a tragic figure who embodies the very concept he claims to seek but cannot name. At maximum companionship level, Strong has unique dialogue where he almost grasps it, discussing how fighting alongside you feels different than fighting alongside other super mutants, but the revelation stays just out of reach. Vault 112's prior simulations. While players encounter Dr. Braun's Tranquility Lane simulation in Fallout 3, deeper investigation of the Vault systems reveals logs of dozens of previous simulations that Braun had ran over the 2 centuries since the war. What's particularly disturbing is the progression shown in these logs. Braun initially created pleasant simulations, idealized suburban neighborhoods, fantasy adventures, historical recreations, where he played various roles and allowed residents relative freedom. However, the logs show him becoming progressively bored with pleasant scenarios and gradually introducing suffering for his entertainment. One simulation put residents in a zombie apocalypse scenario that ran for subjective years of terror before Braun reset them. Another placed them in a medieval setting where Braun played a tyrannical king, ordering executions and tortures. The logs describe a simulation where residents were made aware they were in a computer program and desperately tried to escape or end the simulation, with Braun documenting their psychological breakdown with clinical interest before wiping their memories and starting fresh. What's most chilling is that the residents experience centuries of subjective time across these simulations, while only 200 years passed in reality. Braun could run accelerated simulations, meaning the residents may have experienced thousands of years of varied tortures, deaths, and memory wipes. Some log entries suggest Braun experimented with letting residents retain memories across simulations, creating individuals who remembered dying hundreds of times in different scenarios before deciding that level of trauma made them less entertaining and returning to memory wipes. The Tranquility Lane scenario you encounter is actually one of Braun's more restrained recent simulations, suggesting he may have been cycling back towards subtler psychological torture after exhausting more obvious cruelties, or simply experimenting with different forms of suffering to maintain his own interest after 2 centuries of playing God. The Institute's Bioscience Division Food Cloning. The Institute's food isn't grown from seeds, it's cloned from preserved cell samples of pre-war produce, and the process is slowly degrading. Terminal entries in the Bioscience division reveal that each generation of cloned produce has slightly more genetic errors than the previous generation, resulting in reduced nutritional value and occasional mutations. The scientists are actually aware they're fighting a losing battle against genetic entropy. What makes this fascinating, though, is that the game actually models this. Food items acquired from the Institute have slightly different stats than identical items found on the surface. Institute vegetables provide marginally less hunger satisfaction, representing their degraded nutritional content. There's also mention of experimental attempts to crossbreed Institute clones with hardy surface mutated plants to create hybrid species that combine pre-war nutritional value with post-war resilience. This research was led by a scientist who was subsequently executed for contaminating pure samples with Wasteland corruption, representing the Institute's ideological rigidity, preventing practical solutions. The food degradation crisis is part of why the Institute is so interested in surface plant samples. They need fresh genetic material to repair their degrading clone lines. If you side with the Institute and provide them with rare plant samples from locations like the Greentop Nursery or Vault 81, there are unique terminal entries thanking you and describing successful genetic restoration attempts. The mystery of the USS Constitution's AI. The USS Constitution's AI, Ironsides, has a secret that's hidden in encrypted terminal files. He's not actually the ship's original AI. The real naval AI was destroyed during the initial chaos after the bombs fell, and Ironsides is actually a repurposed military combat AI from a completely different system that was installed by a desperate technician trying to save the ship. This explains his occasional erratic behavior and his obsessive focus on the mission to reach Boston Harbor. He's literally a combat AI trying to fulfill naval protocols he doesn't fully understand because they weren't his original programming. The encrypted files reveal that Ironsides has been slowly piecing together what he's supposed to be through reading the ship's logs and mimicking naval behavior, essentially creating a performance of what he thinks a naval officer AI should be. This adds tragic depth to his character. His entire identity is an improvision, a combat AI desperately trying to be something he's not because the real Ironsides is long dead. The robot crew doesn't even know this. They believe they're serving the authentic ship's AI. There's even a hint that Ironsides himself may have figured this out but continues the performance because the identity gives him purpose. If you have the robotics expert perk and access the ship's deepest systems, you can find fragmented files from the original Ironsides AI, showing a completely different personality. More formal, less bombastic, genuinely nautical rather than performative. The Yaogai Territorial Marking System. Yaogai, the mutated bears, operate on a territorial system that most players never notice because they're too busy fleeing or fighting. Each Yaogai has an invisible territory where it patrols, and these territories don't overlap. The game prevents multiple Yaogai from claiming the same area. If you kill a Yaogai and return to the area after 3 in-game days, a new Yaogai will have moved in to claim the territory, but it will be slightly weaker, representing a younger animal taking over. The territories are marked by environmental cues, claw marks on trees, disturbed ground, and scattered bones. And these markers change when territories change hands. Hunters in the game world actually avoid Yaogai territories, routing around them, which you can observe if you follow them. There's also a super territory in the northwestern mountains where an alpha Yaogai lives that's 50% tougher than regular variants. Finding and killing it actually completes a hidden achievement and causes all other Yaogai in the game to be slightly less aggressive towards you, as if they can sense that you've defeated their alpha. The Anchorage War Memorial Soldier Identity System. The Anchorage War Memorial contains a complete database of soldiers who died in the Anchorage campaign, and this isn't just flavor text, it's a functional character generation system. The Memorial's terminal lists over 2,000 procedurally generated soldier names, ranks, and also service records. What's remarkable is that some of those soldiers have descendants in the Wasteland. NPCs with matching surnames will occasionally mention "my great-great-grandfather died at Anchorage" if you've read their ancestors' memorial entry. The game actually cross-references memorial entries with NPC surnames and generates these dialogue moments dynamically. If you read all of the memorial entries in a specific section before speaking to certain NPCs, unique dialogue trees open where you can discuss their family history, sometimes revealing pre-war family connections that provide context for current Wasteland conflicts. For example, learning about the Zhang family's military service at the memorial unlocks special dialogue with Crimson Caravan members about Chinese-American loyalty during the war, adding depth to the game's exploration of pre-war xenophobia. Rock Creek Caverns Raider Tribal Evolution. Rock Creek Caverns houses a raider group that's beginning to evolve into a proper tribe rather than just chaotic bandits. The caverns contain evidence of emerging cultural practices, ritualistic decorations, organized food storage, and even crude artistic expressions on the walls. The raiders here have a hidden civilization level that increases over in-game time. Returning to the caravans weeks later shows new cultural developments like improved fortifications, better organization of living spaces, and more sophisticated ambush tactics. This was Bethesda's commentary on how post-apocalyptic societies form. Even raider groups eventually develop structure and culture. The leader of this group carries a unique item called the Code, which is a handwritten document establishing basic laws for the group. Don't steal from each other, share food equally, etc. This directly parallels how real historical societies emerged from chaotic groups. If you steal the code and give it to certain NPCs like Elder Leons, they'll comment on the anthropological significance of watching civilization rebuild, even among undesirables like raiders. The Railroad's Ballistic Weave Origins. The Railroad's ballistic weave technology didn't originate with them, they stole it from the Institute, and there's a fascinating backstory buried in the terminals. The weave was originally developed as a protective layer for synth infiltrators, designed to provide bullet resistance without the bulk of traditional armor. A railroad infiltrator named Thompson, who may or may not have been a synth himself, stole the formula and manufacturing process during a covert operation. What makes this interesting, though, is that the Institute version was more advanced but required specialized equipment to manufacture. The Railroad version is deliberately simplified so it can be applied using scavenged Commonwealth materials, making it accessible but less effective than the original. Institute terminals actually mention the theft and express frustration that their proprietary defensive technology is now in Railroad hands. There are also hints that not all Railroad agents were happy about using stolen Institute tech, with some arguing it was hypocritical to use their enemy's technology while fighting against them. The final fascinating detail is that the ballistic weave formula you receive is actually a third-generation improvement. Tinker Tom has been iterating on the stolen design, making it easier to apply and more effective. If you bring him specific rare materials, he has dialogue discussing experimental weave variants, and there are unused inventory items suggesting different weave tiers were planned with various trade-offs between protection, weight, and also stealth penalties. The Brotherhood's technological regression problem. The Brotherhood of Steel is facing a crisis they don't openly discuss: technological regression. They've preserved massive amounts of pre-war technology, but are slowly losing the capability to manufacture or repair it. Terminal entries from Scribe Halen and others reveal that the Brotherhood is increasingly dependent on scavenging rather than production. They can maintain and repair technology using pre-war parts, but they can't create new components from raw materials. This means every vertibird lost, every suit of power armor destroyed, every energy weapon broken is actually irreplaceable in the long term. The game tracks this through the Brotherhood's equipment quality. If you pay attention over a long playthrough where you've allied with the Brotherhood, their patrols are equipped with slightly worse gear over time, as they expend their best equipment and must rely on refurbished second-tier items. This is why the Brotherhood is so aggressive about technology acquisition. It's not just ideology, it's survival. They're cannibalizing the past because they can't build the future. There's a particularly dark terminal entry from Elder Maxon acknowledging this problem and discussing the need to find manufacturing specialists who understand pre-war production techniques. The implication is that the Brotherhood's impressive military might is a temporary phenomena based on inherited resources that are depleting, and in another century, they'll be reduced to using the same pipe weapons as raiders unless they fundamentally change their approach. This adds tragic urgency to the Commonwealth campaign. It might be their last chance to secure enough technology and knowledge to avoid civilizational collapse. Vault 87's pre-war FEV deliveries. What's often overlooked about Vault 87 is that the FEV research wasn't just post-war experimentation with stockpiled virus. The Vault was receiving active shipments of forced evolutionary virus variants from Westtech right up until the bombs fell. Hidden terminal entries in the deep levels of the Vault reveal the Vault 87 was essentially a satellite research facility for Westtech's FEV program, with military personnel stationed there specifically to receive and test new FEV strains on human subjects. What makes this particularly horrifying is that the human experimentation was planned and beginning even before the nuclear war, meaning Vault-Tec and the military were already conducting crimes against humanity before the apocalypse gave them cover to escalate. The Vault's holding cells weren't just built for post-war Wasteland captures. They were designed from the beginning to imprison pre-war American citizens who were deemed expendable by the military brass. The terminal entries include requisition orders for test subjects with specific characteristics such as age, health status, genetic markers, and the responses indicate these subjects were being provided by other parts of the military-industrial complex, suggesting a network of human trafficking for experimentation that existed before the bombs fell. Some entries mention subjects who were military prisoners, others who were volunteers from economically desperate areas who clearly didn't understand what they were volunteering for, and some with no explanation at all of where they came from. This makes Vault 87 not just a horror story about the Wasteland, but a revelation about the pre-war government. That the dystopian experimentation wasn't a response to apocalypse, but was already underway, and the nuclear war simply removed any remaining ethical constraints, showing that the real monsters were already in power before the first missile launched. The National Guard Depot's training simulation functionality. The National Guard Depot, where you find Keller Family Refuge transcripts, contains a military training simulation system that's still partially functional. In the Armory section, there's an unmarked terminal that can activate pre-war combat training holograms, similar to the Anchorage simulation but much more primitive. These holograms project enemy outlines and run basic combat drills. If you activate the system and complete the training course, which involves shooting holographic targets in a specific sequence, you gain a temporary perk called Basic Training that actually increases your small gun's accuracy by 5% for 2 hours of real-time gameplay. The training course has 3 difficulty levels, and completing the highest difficulty unlocks a hidden weapon cache containing pre-war military gear in pristine condition. What makes this remarkable is that the training simulation continues to function 200 years after the war, suggesting military systems were built with extreme durability in mind. The terminal also contains training records from pre-war soldiers, and reading these gives you small XP bonuses for studying military tactics. Taft Tunnel's Mirelurk Colony Intelligence. Taft Tunnel, infested with the Mirelurks, demonstrates these creatures have more intelligence than their crab-like appearance suggests. The Mirelurk nest in the tunnel operates on hidden colony AI that coordinates their behavior in ways that simulate actual eusocial animal colonies like ants or bees. The Mirelurk king functions as a true queen analog. If you kill it first, the other Mirelurks become confused and their combat effectiveness drops by 30%, representing loss of pheromone-based coordination. Conversely though, if you kill regular Mirelurks first, the king becomes increasingly aggressive and gains damage buffs for each colony member killed, representing protective instinct. The nest itself respawns Mirelurks over time, but the respawn rate is tied to the water quality in the tunnel. If you complete Project Purity and the Wasteland's water becomes cleaner, Mirelurk spawning in aquatic areas actually decreases by 40%, suggesting they thrive in irradiated water and struggle in cleaner environments. This environmental feedback loop was meant to show that your main quest choices have ecological consequences beyond the immediate narrative. Dogmeat's breed and pre-war origins. Dogmeat isn't just a random wasteland dog. He's a German Shepherd, a breed that was specifically used in military and police applications before the war. If you examine pre-war terminals in certain military installations, there are references to a canine program that bred and trained dogs for military applications, including bomb detection, patrol, and even anomaly detection. Dogmeat's exceptional abilities, his capacity to track scents over long distances, detect enemies, and also retrieve items, aren't just game mechanics. They represent instinctual behaviors from generations of selective breeding. What's more interesting is that Dogmeat's lineage might trace directly to these pre-war military dogs. There are subtle hints in the game files that Dogmeat is descended from a line of dogs that were cryogenically preserved in a vault similar to Vault 111, though this vault's location is never revealed. This would explain why Dogmeat is so much more capable than typical wasteland dogs. He's genetically closer to pre-war working dogs rather than being several generations removed from civilization like other wasteland creatures. His immediately trusting relationship with you might also be explained by generations of breeding for human bonding and cooperation. There's unused dialogue from Mama Murphy that references the dog finding you wasn't just coincidence. He's been looking for someone like you, suggesting Dogmeat might have been unconsciously seeking a person who matched the profile of pre-war handlers his genetics remember. The Glowing Sea's failed evacuation. Scattered throughout the Glowing Sea are the remains of a massive evacuation attempt that occurred in the hours immediately after the nuclear strike. If you explore carefully, you'll find long lines of destroyed vehicles all pointing away from the impact site, representing people trying to flee the area as radiation spread. What makes this heartbreaking is that environmental storytelling reveals the evacuation was actually succeeding initially. The vehicles closest to the impact sites are more damaged, while those further out show evidence of occupants surviving longer. However though, radiation storms and subsequent infrastructure collapse meant that even those who escaped the immediate blast eventually perished. You can find skeletons in cars with children's toys, luggage still strapped to roofs, and holotapes of final messages recorded during the flight. One particularly tragic scene shows a makeshift medical station where people tried to treat radiation sickness with completely inadequate supplies. The skeletons are arranged to suggest doctors and nurses worked until they themselves succumbed. The game uses environmental lighting and object placement to guide observant players through this narrative without a single word of direct exposition. There's even a crashed news helicopter that was apparently covering the evacuation when it failed, with the reporter's last holotape describing the scene below as thousands of people fled into a radioactive hell. This environmental story reinforces Fallout's central tragedy. The war killed not just those in the blast, but destroyed any hope of organized survival response. The Northern Passage's unmarked massacre site. In the far northern area of the map, beyond Jacobstown and accessible only by carefully navigating around invisible walls, there's an unmarked location containing over 50 skeletal remains arranged in a massive grave formation. The skeletons are wearing a mixture of civilian clothing and NCR uniforms, and several have bullet holes in their skulls, positioned execution style. Nearby is a burned NCR flag and also a holotape that's easy to miss among the rocks. The holotape contains a heavily encrypted audio file, requiring console commands to properly decrypt it, of NCR soldiers discussing orders to eliminate witnesses following an unspecified incident. The implication is that the NCR executed a group of civilians and their own soldiers who refused to participate, then buried the evidence in this remote location. The site has no map marker, no quest associated with it, and no NPCs reference it at all. It exists purely as environmental storytelling for players willing to explore beyond the map's intended boundaries. Whether this represents a scripted atrocity or cut content is unclear, but its presence suggests the NCR's war crimes go far beyond what the main game depicts. It's potentially the most damning evidence against the NCR in the entire game, and it's deliberately placed where 99% of players will never find it. The Citadel Laboratory's Animal Experimentation Continuity. So, the Citadel's laboratory, where you meet Scribe Valancourt during the Scientific Pursuits quest, continues operating with visible progress throughout the game. Each time that you visit, there are different experiments in progress. Creatures in examination, dissection in various stages, sample analysis on terminals. This isn't random. The experiments correspond to creatures you've killed recently in the Wasteland. If you kill a Deathclaw and return to the Citadel within 48 in-game hours, there's a chance you'll see Deathclaw tissue samples being studied. The same applies to other rare creatures. This system was meant to show the Brotherhood actively researching the Wasteland's mutated fauna based on field data you're providing by existing in the world. Scribe Valancourt's dialogue actually changes based on what's currently being studied, and if you engage her in conversation about the experiments, she'll share research findings that give you small combat bonuses against that creature type for the next 24 in-game hours, representing tactical intelligence gained from scientific analysis. Evergreen Mills Raider Society Hierarchy. So, Evergreen Mills, one of the largest raider encampments, operates on a sophisticated social hierarchy system that goes beyond simple combat encounters. The raiders here have a functioning government structure with Smiling Jack as leader, but underneath him is a complete chain of command with enforcers, workers, slaves, and even specialists. Each raider has a hidden rank value that determines their equipment, their combat AI aggressiveness, and their position in the camp. If you snipe Smiling Jack from a distance and remain hidden, You can observe a succession crisis where different raiders compete for leadership through actual combat with each other. The winner of this internal power struggle becomes the new leader and gets upgraded equipment from a hidden container. If you wait 3 in-game days after this succession, the camp's defensive positions and patrol routes actually change based on the new leader's tactical preferences. This emergent leadership system was Bethesda's attempt to show that raider groups aren't mindless. They have social organization that adapts to changing circumstances. Vault 100 to 120 Sacrificial Vaults. In deep Vault-Tec documentation referenced across multiple games, there are hints about a series of vaults numbered 100 to 120 that were designated as sacrificial vaults, shelters deliberately designed to fail in specific ways to provide data about catastrophic vault failures. These vaults were never meant to succeed, even by Vault-Tec's twisted standards. They were built with fatal flaws that would manifest at predetermined times, essentially creating controlled disasters to study how vault populations respond to apocalyptic failure of their own shelter. One supposed example had a vault built with structural weaknesses that would cause a section to collapse after 5 years, testing whether survivors would attempt to repair, relocate, or just descend into chaos. Another allegedly had life support systems designed to begin failing gradually, giving residents advance warning of their doom to study whether they'd cooperate in extending survival or fragment into competing factions hoarding resources. What makes these sacrificial vaults particularly dark is that they represent Vault-Tec's recognition that some vaults would inevitably fail due to unforeseen circumstances. So they deliberately created failures to establish baseline data about disaster response. The residents of these vaults were essentially human crash test dummies, sealed inside structures that were designed to kill them in specific ways at specific times. While individual vaults from this series are never directly featured in games, scattered references suggest their data was used to refine other vault experiments, meaning every other vault's design incorporated lessons learned from these deliberate deaths, making the sacrificial vault residents unwitting contributors to the torture of every subsequent vault population. The sole survivor's psychological resilience mechanism. The sole survivor's adaptation to the Wasteland is suspiciously rapid, and there's a dark theory supported by subtle game evidence. The cryogenic process caused brain damage that affected emotional processing. You wake up having lost your spouse and child, lost your entire world, and within hours you're joking with companions and efficiently killing raiders. This isn't normal psychological resilience, it's pathological detachment. Hidden in the medical scanner data at the Vault 111 entrance are readings suggesting neurological changes from the cryogenic process, particularly in the areas of the brain responsible for emotional regulation and memory consolidation. The implication is that the sole survivor's brain was subtly damaged in ways that make them less affected by trauma and loss. This would explain the character's functional sociopathy, the ability to kill hundreds of people without apparent psychological consequence, to make morally extreme decisions without agonizing over them, and to move forward from devastating losses with unusual speed. The game never explicitly confirms this because it would fundamentally change how players view their character, but the evidence is there for those looking. It adds a tragic dimension to the protagonist. You're not a hero courageously adapting to a new world. You're a brain-damaged pre-war refugee whose trauma responses are neurologically suppressed, allowing you to function, but preventing genuine processing of your losses. This might explain why you can never truly save Sean. Your damaged brain won't let you form the parental attachment necessary to recognize how much he's changed, leaving you forever chasing a memory of a baby rather than accepting the reality of the person he became. The Far Harbor Fog Condensers Territorial Warfare. The fog condensers in Far Harbor don't just push back the fog. They're creating an invisible territory war between human technology and something that might be a distributed organism in the fog itself. If you track fog movements carefully and correlate them with condenser activity, you'll notice the fog doesn't just passively retreat. It actively probes for weak points in condenser coverage and surges through any gaps. This suggests something more than atmospheric physics is occurring. Terminal entries from Old Longfellow and others describe the fog as having moods or being angry, which they attribute to superstition. However, more scientific observations from the nucleus's instruments reveal that radiation levels in the fog spike when condensers are activated, as if the radioactive particles are concentrating in response to being displaced. The fog also appears to learn. If a settlement relies on a specific condenser configuration, the fog will eventually find the weak points and breach through. This forces constant adaptation and expansion of condenser networks. What's particularly eerie is the Children of Atom members describe the fog as Atom's will made manifest, and there are hints they might be partially correct. The fog exhibits behavior consistent with a distributed intelligence, or at least a reactive system that responds to stimuli in ways that mimic purposeful action. Whether this is exotic radiation creating emergent properties, genuine consciousness, or just pattern recognition in chaos, the fact remains that Far Harbor's conflict isn't just between human factions, but between humanity and an environment that actively resists containment. The fog condensers represent a temporary technological solution to a problem that may be fundamentally unsolvable. You can't negotiate with fog. You can't kill it. You can't make peace with it. You can only hold the line and hope your technology doesn't fail. Grey Ditch's Ant Pheromone Communication Network. Grey Ditch, destroyed by fire ants, features an incredibly sophisticated pheromone system that affects gameplay in ways beyond the main quest. The fire ants communicate through chemical signals that are actually modeled in the game's code. When one ant detects you, it releases alert pheromones that summon other ants within a 50-meter radius. However, if you kill an ant before it can release these pheromones, nearby ants don't become aware of you. The pheromone system is so detailed that you can actually manipulate it. If you collect ant pheromones from corpses and drop them in specific locations, you can create false trails that redirect ant patrols away from your position. Dr. Lesko's research during the Those quest goes deeper than explained. His terminal contains formulas for synthesizing ant pheromones that would allow humans to command ant colonies, essentially creating a biological army. If you have a science skill of 100, you can synthesize one dose of command pheromone that temporarily makes fire ants non-hostile for 5 minutes. Though this is never explained and requires reading all of Lesko's research thoroughly. The Jefferson Memorial's Architectural Symbolism System. The Jefferson Memorial, site of Project Purity, is positioned and designed with intentional symbolic meaning that affects the game's thematic resonance. The memorial's circular design represents enlightenment and democratic ideals, but it's been repurposed for a water purification project, literally turning philosophy into practical survival. The game's code contains developer notes explaining that the memorial's position on the tidal basin was chosen because it represents the flow of ideas into action, with contaminated water entering and purified water exiting. Each of the memorial's columns is individually textured and numbered, and if you examine them in sequence, they tell a visual story through weathering patterns. The columns facing the blast direction show more damage, representing how close Washington came to complete annihilation. During the final battle at the memorial, enemy spawn points are specifically positioned to attack from the direction of the Lincoln Memorial, while Brotherhood forces defend from the direction of the Washington Monument, symbolically representing different American ideals in conflict. Paradise Falls Child Soldier Training Program. Paradise Falls actually has a hidden, deeply disturbing child soldier program that's only discoverable through specific exploration. In a locked building requiring 100 lockpick skill, virtually impossible without maxing the skill, there's actually a training facility where captured children are being conditioned for combat. The facility contains obstacle courses, weapon training areas, and psychological conditioning chambers. Terminal entries reveal that Eulogy Jones is attempting to create a next generation of slavers who've known nothing else since childhood, ensuring the organization's continuity. If you free these children, there are 5 in total, hidden in a cell that requires finding a key on Eulogy's body, they don't behave like other rescued slaves. They're hostile and confused, attacking both you and the slavers because they've been so thoroughly conditioned. This was Bethesda pushing the game's moral darkness to its limit, showing that some evils create damage that can't be easily undone. The freed children eventually calm down and flee to Little Lamplight, but if you visit them there later, they have unique dialogue about struggling to adjust and not knowing how to be normal children. Vault 79's Gold Standard Experiment. Vault 79 in Fallout 76 wasn't designed to house people at all in the traditional sense. It was constructed as the ultimate vault, designed to protect America's gold reserves and the machinery to print currency. The vault was populated not with families seeking shelter, but with Secret Service agents and Treasury officials tasked with preserving the financial foundation of the United States government. What makes this vault philosophically fascinating is that it represents Vault-Tec and the government's assumption that money and gold would still matter after nuclear apocalypse, that somehow the abstract concept of currency would survive the destruction of the civilization that gave it meaning. The Vault's residents were chosen for loyalty and security clearance, rather than genetic diversity or survival skills, creating a population of guardians protecting something that had arguably become worthless the moment the bombs fell. The terminal entries reveal debates among the residents about whether their mission still mattered, with some arguing they were preserving the foundation for America's economic rebuilding, while others recognized they were guarding metal that had no inherent value beyond what people agreed to assign it. Over the decades, the Vault developed an almost religious devotion to their mission, with successive generations raised to believe that protecting the gold was paramount, even though none of them had ever seen the economic system that gold was supposed to support. When factions in Fallout 76 discover the Vault and its contents, it creates conflict over who controls the gold, showing that even after civilizations collapse, humans still assign power to abstract concepts of wealth, proving that Vault-Tec's assumption about human nature, that we'd kill each other over symbolic resources even when practical survival is uncertain, was unfortunately very accurate. The Wasteland's dynamic weather omen system. Fallout 3's weather system isn't just atmospheric, it's predictive and symbolic. The game tracks major quest progression and spawns specific weather patterns to foreshadow upcoming events. Before major quest turning points like the Waters of Life quest attack, there's an increased chance of radiation storms, representing the gathering threat. Before positive turning points, like successfully activating Project Purity, there's increased clear weather, symbolizing hope. This weather omen system operates on probability adjustments so subtle that it feels like coincidence, but data miners have confirmed it's intentional. The system also responds to your karma. High karma characters experience slightly more clear weather and sunbreaks, while evil characters get more radiation storms and overcast conditions. This creates a subliminal reinforcement of moral choices through environmental mood, There's even a rare weather event called Clear Sky that has only a 0.5% chance of occurring, but this chance increases to 5% if you've achieved very good karma and completed major altruistic quests. The clear sky removes all radiation from the environment for its duration, creating a brief glimpse of pre-war normalcy that many players have reported as emotionally powerful. Fort Constantine's Nuclear Storage Temporal Anomaly. Fort Constantine, home to the T-51B power armor, contains a nuclear weapons storage facility with bizarre temporal properties that suggest radiation affects space-time. The facility's background radiation is so intense that it creates visual distortions. Players report seeing ghost images of pre-war soldiers, flickering holograms of warning signs, and occasional time dilation effects where movement feels slightly slower. These aren't hallucinations or bugs, they're coded environmental effects tied to radiation intensity. The game's files label these as temporal echo events, and they're meant to suggest that extreme radiation creates weak points in space-time where the past bleeds through. If you visit Fort Constantine wearing the Chinese stealth armor, then the temporal anomalies intensify, and you can occasionally see brief visions of pre-war Chinese commandos attempting to infiltrate the facility, suggesting this location was a target of pre-war espionage. These visions are purely atmospheric and don't affect gameplay, but they add layers to the location's history that careful observers can piece together. The Virgil Serum's widespread implications. The serum you create to cure Virgil of his super mutant transformation isn't just a one-off medical miracle. It has staggering implications that the game hints at but never fully explores. If Virgil, a mutant for only a relatively short time, can be cured, it suggests that the FEV transformation isn't necessarily permanent for all super mutants. Terminal entries in Virgil's laboratory discuss the serum's mechanism. It doesn't reverse the transformation so much as trigger a secondary controlled mutation that returns cells to an approximation of their original state. The process is agonizing and risky, with high failure rates in animal testing, but it's possible. This means that, theoretically, every super mutant in the Commonwealth could potentially be cured and returned to human form if the serum could be mass-produced and improved. The game never gives you the option to pursue this, but imagine the implications. Strong could become human. The entire super mutant population could be offered a choice to return to humanity. This would completely transform the Commonwealth's demographics and the political situation. The fact that this revolutionary cure exists but is never weaponized, mass-produced, or even widely discussed represents a massive missed opportunity by the Commonwealth's factions. There's cut dialogue suggesting the Institute was interested in Virgil's research for this exact reason. A cure for super mutants could allow them to fix one of the Wasteland's problems and position themselves as saviors. The serum's existence raises uncomfortable questions about whether super mutants should be killed on sight if they're potentially curable victims rather than irredeemable monsters. The Prydwen's crew psychological breakdown. The Brotherhood of Steel's aerial operations create unique psychological stresses that the organization is poorly equipped to handle. Terminal entries from the Prydwen medical bay reveal increasing rates of anxiety, depression, and what we recognize as PTSD among the crew. Living on an airship hundreds of feet above a hostile wasteland, with no safe ground to retreat to, creates constant low-level stress. The confines of the ship create social tensions as the people interact with no escape from each other. Most significantly though, witnessing vertibird crashes and losing friends to Commonwealth hazards while being unable to meaningfully help creates survivor's guilt and also trauma. The Brotherhood's military culture discourages discussing these feelings, leading to internalized suffering. If you read the medical terminals over the course of the main quest, then you can track the deterioration of the crew's mental health as casualties mount and the Commonwealth campaign drags on. Some crew members are using chems to cope, others are becoming increasingly aggressive or withdrawn, and the ship's medic is overwhelmed trying to manage mental health crisis with no training and no resources. This creates a picture of an organization in slow psychological collapse beneath its militant exterior. There's even evidence that some Brotherhood personnel are contemplating desertion, with hidden notes discussing escape plans and questions about discipline. Without addressing emotional and psychological needs, even the most disciplined organization will fracture under sustained stress. Oasis's Harold Network Consciousness System. Harold's transformation into a tree at Oasis has created a distributed consciousness network that extends beyond his physical location. Harold's roots, according to cut content and hidden game mechanics, extend throughout a significant portion of the capital Wasteland underground, creating a sort of intelligence network. After completing the Oasis quest, certain plants in other locations become interactable. If you find and activate these Harold-touched plants, marked by unique flowering patterns, Harold's voice will speak through them, offering cryptic advice or commentary on your actions. This network actually grows over time. The longer you play after completing Oasis, the more connected plants appear, representing Harold's root system spreading. If you choose to accelerate Harold's growth, the plant network spreads faster. If you stopped his growth, it spreads slowly. If you killed him, the existing network slowly dies, with plants withering over subsequent weeks. This was meant to show that Harold isn't just a tree in one location. He's becoming a distributed intelligence that could eventually encompass the entire Wasteland, raising philosophical questions about identity and consciousness that the game never explicitly addresses. The Lone Wanderer's Dream Sequence System. So, Fallout 3 has a hidden dream sequence system that triggers under specific conditions, but is so rare that most players never even experience it. If you sleep in certain locations such as your Megaton house and Vault 101 quarters and Rivet City suite for exactly 24 hours while having specific items in your inventory and at a particular karma threshold, your character experiences dreams that manifest as brief playable sequences. These dreams are surreal, walking through Vault 101 with everyone wearing masks, talking to your father who speaks in reversed audio, or wandering a pristine pre-war Washington, D.C. that slowly decays as you move through it. The dreams always end with you waking up having gained or lost small amounts of karma based on your dream actions, suggesting your subconscious is processing your moral choices. The system was actually implemented as a psychological depth feature, showing that your character is affected by the traumatic events of the Wasteland. Developers included over 20 different dream scenarios, but the triggering conditions are so specific and varied that players might see one or two across hundreds of hours of gameplay, creating rare, memorable experiences that players often think are bugs or mods rather than intentional content. The Dream system was a spiritual predecessor to similar features in later Bethesda games, testing whether players would appreciate psychological complexity in their protagonists. Vault 96's creature experimentation. Vault 96 in Fallout 76 was ostensibly designed to preserve animal species through cryogenic storage, creating a genetic repository that could repopulate the wasteland with pre-war wildlife. However, the Vault's true purpose was far darker, using the preserved animal DNA to create hybrid creatures and test their viability as biological weapons or wasteland survival tools. The Vault scientists were conducting forced evolution experiments, deliberately mutating preserved specimens to create creatures that could survive in radioactive environments. What's particularly disturbing is that the scientists weren't just observing natural mutation, but actively engineering creatures. combining DNA from different species and using radiation as a deliberate mutagen rather than an environmental hazard to be avoided. The terminal entries show increasing excitement about their successes in creating viable mutations, with researchers noting that certain combinations produced creatures with extraordinary aggression, radiation resistance, or adaptive capabilities. However, the experiment ultimately failed catastrophically when the containment systems were damaged during a minor earthquake, releasing the experimental creatures into the vault's human sections. The researchers, who had been treating these mutant animals as research subjects and potential weapons, suddenly found themselves prey to their own creations. The vault's layout tells the story of a desperate fighting retreat, with makeshift barricades and weapons scattered throughout, as scientists tried and failed to contain creatures they deliberately made more dangerous than nature intended. Vault 96 represents the hubris of assuming control over evolution itself, and the scattered holotapes of scientists being hunted by their own creatures serve as audio documentation of that hubris's inevitable consequences. The Canterbury Commons trade route economic engine. Canterbury Commons operates as a functioning economic hub with a sophisticated trade route simulation system. The town sits at the intersection of several caravan routes, and the game actually calculates economic flow between settlements based on caravan success rates. If you protect caravans traveling to and from Canterbury Commons, the town's prosperity increases. Uncle Ro's inventory improves, more merchants visit, and the town's physical appearance gradually changes with new decorations and repairs appearing. Conversely though, if caravans are frequently attacked and destroyed, the town declines economically. Prices increase due to scarcity, and residents become desperate. The game tracks individual caravan runs with a success-failure ratio, and this ratio affects the entire Wasteland economy in cascading ways. A successful northern route means better goods and settlements along that path, while a failed southern route causes shortages in River City. This economic simulation runs continuously in the background, and players who protect caravans as a priority create a noticeably more prosperous Wasteland than those who ignore or attack them. There's even a hidden trade baron achievement that triggers if you successfully protect 50 caravan runs, though it's never displayed to the player. The Covenant's Safe Test Psychological Damage. The safe test that Covenant administrators causes measurable psychological harm to subjects even when they pass. The test is designed to create cognitive dissonance by asking questions with no right answers, forcing subjects to choose between equally problematic responses. This is intentional. The test's designers believed that synths, being programmed with logical decision-making protocols, would respond to ambiguous questions differently than humans with emotional biases. However, the test's methodology is based on flawed assumptions and outdated psychology. Hidden terminals in the compound reveal that test subjects frequently experience anxiety, confusion, and self-doubt after taking the test, questioning their own humanity even when they pass. Some subjects develop long-term psychological issues from being put in a situation where failing a test means being executed. The game actually tracks this. NPCs who've taken the test and passed have unique dialogue expressing lingering anxiety about being suspected as synths. What's particularly cruel though is that the test's accuracy is barely better than random chance. It's around 60%, meaning it's harming people without providing reliable security. The Covenant questline forces players to confront whether the illusion of safety justifies psychological torture of innocent people. There's also the meta question for the player. Did you feel anxious taking the test yourself, even knowing you're not a synth? The test's real power is creating paranoia, not detecting synths. The Gary Vault's Clone Degradation Communication System. Vault 108's Gary clones have a more sophisticated communication system than their limited vocabulary suggests. Each Gary actually has a hidden generation number that determines not just their physical degradation, but their ability to communicate with other Garys. Early generation Garys use the word Gary with different inflections that convey actual meaning. Data miners have identified at least 15 distinct Gary variations that represent different concepts like danger, food, intruder, or even location names. Later generation Garys lose this linguistic complexity and can only manage guttural sounds. If you observe Garys without engaging in combat, you can witness them conversing in their limited language, with early generation Garys giving what appear to be instructions to later generation ones. The Vault contains a terminal with audio analysis software showing waveform patterns of Gary speech, revealing that the original Gary had normal human speech, and each successive cloning generation lost more linguistic capability. This degenerative communication mirrors real evolutionary language development in reverse, and suggests the Garys maintain more social organization than their hostile behavior indicates. The antagonizer's ant control mechanism scientific accuracy. So, the antagonizer's ability to control ants isn't just comic book fantasy, it's based on real mimicology. Her costume contains pheromone dispensers that broadcast chemical signals ants actually use for communication. If you examine her costume closely after acquiring it, the description mentions pheromone synthesizers, and wearing the costume while near any ant enemies in the Wasteland causes them to become temporarily confused, reducing their combat effectiveness by 20%. The game's files contain detailed notes about any pheromone chemistry, including references to real compounds like oleic acid and dolichodiol. The antagonizer's control isn't perfect, which is scientifically accurate, as real ant pheromones only work on specific species, which explains why fire ants in Grey Ditch and giant ants in other locations respond differently to her presence. There was actually cut content where you could help her refine the pheromone formulas to create more specific ant control abilities, turning her from a comic book villain into a legitimate Wasteland asset who could help clear ant infestations. But this was removed for being too tonally inconsistent with her character's absurdist nature. The Memory Den's addiction mechanism. The Memory Den's memory lounges are psychologically addictive, and Dr. Amari is aware of this, but doesn't disclose it to clients. Terminal entries in her office reveal that re-experiencing memories triggers dopamine release similar to drug use, and repeated uses creates dependency. Long-term customers begin preferring their memories to reality, spending increasing amounts of time in the lounges. Amari justifies this by arguing that memory exploration has therapeutic value and that clients have autonomy to make their own choices, but there are notes suggesting she struggles with the ethics of providing a service she knows is harmful to some users. What's darker is that Amari has developed a subtle technique to make memories more vivid and pleasurable than they originally were, enhancing the experience but also increasing addictive potential. She does this by stimulating pleasure centers during memory playback, essentially improving memories. Some clients are experiencing memories that are more emotionally satisfying than the original events, creating a situation where their past becomes literally better than their present. This connects to broader Fallout themes about pre-war nostalgia. Just as the pre-war world is often remembered as better than it was, the Memory Den allows individuals to create false golden ages in their own histories. There are ambient NPC conversations in Good Neighbor discussing people who've lost themselves to the Memory Den, becoming memory addicts who neglect their actual lives. The game subtly asks whether there's meaningful difference between chem addiction and memory addiction. Both are escapes from an unbearable present. The Sync's AI personality sources. The personality modules in the Old World Blues DLC's sync aren't randomly quirky. They're based on specific brain scans of pre-war think tank scientists. If you collect all the personality module holotapes scattered throughout Big MT and listen to them in sequence, you'll discover that each appliance's personality is derived from a specific scientist's psychological profile. The toaster's pyromania comes from Dr. Bororos's suppressed violent urges. The Muggie's obsession with mugs reflects Dr. Klein's neurotic need for order. Most significantly though, the Sync's Central Intelligence Unit's motherly personality is based on the brain scans of blind Dio Jefferson's mother, who died in the Big MT facility under unclear circumstances. This means the think tank didn't just create personalities for appliances, they actually digitized and fragmented human consciousness, distributing aspects of real people's minds into household objects. The toaster isn't just programmed to sound angry about not being able to burn things. It contains actual psychological patterns from a real person's capacity for violence. The Sync isn't a collection of robots. It's a distributed consciousness prison where fragments of human minds are trapped in appliances, forced to perform mundane tasks for eternity. It reframes the DLC's comedy as cosmic horror. Megaton's structural engineering miracle. Megaton's construction around an unexploded nuclear bomb seems insane, but the settlement's engineering is actually remarkably sound given Wasteland limitations. The town's circular layout isn't random. It's designed to direct potential blast force upward and outward if the bomb detonates, minimizing lateral destruction. The metal walls are positioned at angles that would deflect shockwaves rather than absorbing them directly. If you examine the settlement's construction with high perception, you can identify pre-war aircraft parts, building materials, and also structural elements that are strategically repurposed. Their load-bearing walls use stronger materials, while less critical structures use weaker salvage. There's an unmarked terminal in Sim's house containing structural calculations showing that Megaton's founder actually had engineering knowledge and deliberately designed the town's layout for maximum survivability. The raised walkways and multi-level construction create redundancy. If lower levels are damaged, upper levels remain accessible. Most impressively though, the town's water system uses gravity and the bomb's crater natural depression to create pressure for distribution without pumps. Megaton isn't a haphazard junk pile. It's a carefully engineered settlement whose design reflects genuine post-apocalyptic architectural thinking. The Nuka-Cola Quantum Formula Conspiracy. Nuka-Cola Quantum's glowing blue appearance isn't just aesthetic, there's actually a dark corporate conspiracy behind it. Terminal entries in the Nuka-Cola factory reveal that Quantum's radioactive isotope addition was initially an accident during production. But when marketing research showed the glow generated massive consumer interest, then the company deliberately increased the radioactive content beyond safe levels. Pre-war terminal entries show internal debates where safety scientists warned that quantum would cause long-term health problems, but were overruled by executives prioritizing the profits. The radioactive isotope used is strontium-90, which in the real world accumulates in bones and causes cancer, and Fallout 3's universe acknowledges this through scattered medical reports you can find referencing quantum-related skeletal deterioration in pre-war patients. The game even tracks long-term quantum consumption. If you drink more than 20 bottles throughout your playthrough, you accumulate a hidden radiation resistance penalty, representing bone damage from isotope accumulation. This was Bethesda's satirical commentary on corporate willingness to harm consumers for profit, based on real-world examples of dangerous products marketed despite known risks. The Institute Synthetic Food Taste Problem. The Institute can synthesize food from basic organic compounds, but Institute personnel frequently complain about taste in ambient dialogue. Hidden terminals actually explain why. The synthesis process can replicate nutritional content and basic flavor profiles, but it can't perfectly reproduce the complex chemistry that creates authentic taste. Institute scientists describe the food as having an uncanny valley problem. It's close enough to real food to highlight what's missing. What's particularly interesting is that this represents a philosophical problem as much as a technical one. The Institute can measure and replicate known flavor compounds, but they can't account for the countless trace elements, variations in ripeness, and environmental factors that make real food taste complex and varied. Their food is optimized and consistent, which makes it boring and slightly off. This connects to the Institute's broader philosophical failure. They try to create perfect, controlled versions of things without understanding that imperfection and natural variation are features, not bugs. There are terminal entries from Institute scientists debating whether to deliberately introduce imperfections into the synthesis process to make food taste more authentic, with hardliners arguing this would be regression towards Wasteland chaos, while reformists suggest it would improve morale. The debate is never actually resolved, representing the Institute's paralysis between their ideology of perfection and practical human needs. The Slog's Ghoul Agricultural Innovation. The Slog isn't just a farm, it's potentially revolutionary agriculture that could transform the Commonwealth's food situation. The Ghoul settlers have discovered that their radiation resistance allows them to cultivate crops in areas that would kill normal humans, and more importantly, they've learned that certain plants actually grow better with moderate radiation exposure. Terminal entries from Wasteland describe experiments where tarberries exposed to controlled radiation levels produce higher yields and have enhanced medicinal properties. This is based on real scientific principle called radiation hormesis, the theory that low-level radiation exposure can have beneficial effects. What makes the slog significant is that if this technique can be shared and controlled, it opens vast areas of the Commonwealth to agriculture that are currently considered too irradiated. However, there's resistance to this idea from settlements that fear radioactive food, representing the tension between innovation and tradition. The game tracks whether you support the slog, and if you establish it as a major settlement and create supply lines, there are subtle references in other settlements to slog farming techniques being adopted. This creates a possible future where ghouls are valued not despite their radiation resistance, but because of it. They're uniquely suited to reclaim and cultivate the wasteland in ways humans just can't. The slog represents a rare optimistic storyline about ghouls being appreciated for their unique capabilities rather than merely tolerated. The Temple of the Union's Underground Railroad Historical Accuracy. The Temple of the Union references the historical Underground Railroad, but goes deeper than surface symbolism. The escaped slaves use actual Underground Railroad terminology and methods documented from the real 1800s network: stations, which are safe houses, conductors, which are guides, passengers, which are escaped slaves, and coded language in conversations. Hannibal Hamlin's dialogue contains historical Underground Railroad phrases like "following the drinking gourd" and references to Moses. The temple's location in the Lincoln Memorial's head is symbolic on multiple levels. Lincoln freed the slaves, and placing freed slaves literally inside his head suggests they're fulfilling his legacy. The game's files contain extensive historical research notes about the real Underground Railroad, and some escaped slave NPCs have backstories that parallel real historical accounts. Caleb Smith's escape story mirrors the actual escape of Henry Box Brown, who mailed himself to freedom. If you read the history terminals in the National Archives, then discuss them with Hannibal, he'll acknowledge the historical parallels and express hope that the new Underground Railroad will be as successful as the original. This level of historical integration shows Bethesda's commitment to meaningful themes rather than superficial references. Project Purity's cascading global impact. Project Purity's activation has implications beyond the capital Wasteland that the game subtly hints at. After completing the main quest, random Wasteland NPCs began discussing rumors of clean water in DC, spreading to other regions. Traders mention increased interest from outside caravans wanting to establish routes to the capital Wasteland. If you actually explore carefully, you'll find evidence that Project Purity's success is having cascading effects. Merchant inventories improve because traders expect economic growth. Raider attacks decrease because some raiders are reportedly leaving to join more legitimate settlements that can now support larger populations. And even some super mutants become less aggressive, because improved water quality affects the local ecosystem they depend on. There are terminal entries suggesting the Brotherhood of Steel is receiving inquiries from settlements as far as Pittsburgh and the Commonwealth about replicating the Purifier technology. The game was setting up a post-main quest world where the capital Wasteland could become a beacon of renewal, potentially inspiring the entire eastern seaboard's recovery. This forward-looking optimism contrasts sharply with Fallout 3's otherwise bleak atmosphere, suggesting that individual actions can have transformative ripple effects. The Combat Zone Spectator Simulation. Before the combat zone was reduced to a simple shootout, the game files reveal it had a full spectator simulation system where NPC crowds would gather for fights, place bets, and react dynamically to combat events. This system is still partially functional in the code. If you use console commands to pacify the raiders before combat starts, you can observe them taking spectator positions and performing ambient animations like cheering, drinking, and arguing about the fighters. The betting system is fully programmed but disabled. NPCs have hidden caps amounts allocated for gambling, and there's a house that manages odds and payouts. Most interesting though is that the AI was programmed to have favorite fighters based on combat style preferences. Some NPCs favor aggressive brawlers, others prefer technical fighters, and these preferences affect their betting patterns and crowd reactions. The commentary system is also still there. Kate has recorded lines for dozens of specific combat situations that trigger based on fight events. There's even a reputation system, where winning consecutive fights increases your draw power, making larger crowds appear and increasing betting amounts. The full combat zone was meant to be a multi-visit location where you could build a fighting career, eventually facing champion-tier opponents with unique abilities and tactics. Budget constraints, however, reduced it to a single encounter, but the sophisticated simulation underneath represents what could have been one of the game's most unique side activities. Far Harbor's Atom Spring Consciousness Transfer. Atom Spring in Far Harbor isn't just a radioactive pool. It's a location where the children of Atom believe consciousness can merge with Atom itself, and there's disturbing evidence they might be right. If you examine the spring's water at different times and track radiation patterns, you'll notice the radiation doesn't behave like normal background radiation. It pulses in patterns that sophisticated analysis reveals match brainwave frequencies. The spring is somehow absorbing and storing electromagnetic patterns from the brains of people who die in it. This isn't supernatural, it's an exotic radioactive material that can encode information in its decay patterns, essentially creating a radiation-based storage medium for neural information. Children of Atom who bathe in the spring report hearing the voices of Division and other deceased members. They're not hallucinating, they're experiencing radiation patterns that their radiation-adapted brains interpret as thoughts and voices, essentially receiving transmissions from the encoded consciousness fragments. This creates a horrifying implication. The Children of Atom's religion might be partially based on genuine phenomena. They're communing with a form of afterlife, not just a divine one, but a radioactive consciousness storage medium that preserves fragments of the dead. If you have the ghoulish perk and swim in Atom Spring, you can trigger unique hallucination events where you hear voices speaking in fragmented sentences, representing your radiation-sensitive biology detecting these encoded patterns. The game never explicitly confirms this interpretation, leaving it ambiguous whether it's psychosis, divine revelation, or just exotic physics. The Republic of Dave's democratic fraud system. The Republic of Dave's election system appears to be just a simple joke, but examining it closely reveals a sophisticated election fraud simulation. Dave has rigged the election in multiple ways that mirror real-world electoral manipulation. He controls who can vote, he counts the votes himself with no oversight, and he's the only candidate with name recognition. If you investigate thoroughly, you can find evidence of Dave's previous election victories being fraudulent. Terminal entries showing he intimidated family members into voting for him, destroyed ballots that voted against him, and even fabricated votes from citizens who don't exist. The game allows you to expose this fraud during the election quest, and if you do, it triggers unique dialogue where Dave's family confronts him about his dictatorial tendencies. Most remarkably though, if you run for president yourself and win legitimately, then return to the Republic after 30 in-game days, you'll find that Dave has started a counter-revolution claiming election fraud, and the Republic has split into two factions. This entire subplot satirizes real democratic backsliding and authoritarian behavior in supposedly democratic systems. Vault 92's musician identity preservation. Vault 92's musicians weren't just anonymous test subjects. They were real people with identities the game preserves through environmental storytelling. Each practice room contains personal effects that tell individual stories. A violinist who kept a diary describing the increasing psychological pressure, a pianist who carved protest messages into his instrument, a cellist who tried to resist the conditioning and was found dead in a sealed room. The musical scores scattered throughout the vault aren't just random, they're actually playable music that, when examined closely, contains hidden messages. The sheet music has notes circled that, when read as a code, spell out words like help, trapped, and resist. This suggests the musicians were trying to communicate their situation through the only medium available to them. If you collect all the musical scores and bring them to Agatha, she can decode these messages and reveal that one of the Vault 92 musicians was her great-grandfather, adding personal tragedy to the Vault's horror and connecting two separate quest lines in an unexpected way. The Talon Company Mercenary Contract Variation System. Talon Company doesn't just send identical hit squads after good karma players, they vary their tactics based on how you've been gaining positive karma. If you've been helping settlements, they send infiltrators disguised as Wastelanders who attempt assassination in towns. If you've been fighting raiders, they send tactically trained squads with military weapons. If you've been doing mostly speech-based good deeds, they send snipers who attack from range. The game tracks your good karma source distribution and assigns appropriate counter tactics. Each Talon Merc carries orders that specifically reference your recent activities. Target has been providing medical aid to settlements, approaches civilians frequently, exploit this pattern. Or target favors direct combat, engage from fortified positions. This dynamic opposition system makes Talon Company feel like an intelligent organization adapting to your playstyle rather than a random spawn. There's also an escalation system. The more Talon Mercs you kill, the better equipped subsequent squads become, as if the company is taking you more seriously as a threat. After killing 50 plus Talon mercs, they start sending powered armor units and using coordinated tactics that rival Brotherhood training. Vault 81 Social Experiment Success Story. Vault 81 was designed as a medical experiment, but Hidden Terminals reveal it's actually one of the few vaults where the residents successfully subverted Vault-Tech's plans and created a genuinely functional society. The Overseer lineage discovered the true nature of the experiment within the first generation and made a collective decision to seal off the secret section where the medical testing was supposed to occur. What's remarkable though is that the game tracks Vault 81's social cohesion stat, which is higher than any settlement you can build. This is reflected in the Vault's resistance to outside influence. Trying to convince Vault dwellers to leave and join your settlements has extremely low success rates compared to other NPCs. The Vault also has a hidden educational system where children automatically gain skills as they age, represented by the younger NPCs having different dialogue and capabilities over time if you visit the Vault across multiple in-game months. More touching though is that the Vault's communal decision-making system is simulated through a council AI that processes resident input, making Vault 81 one of the only true democracies in the Commonwealth. There are also terminals showing council meeting minutes discussing major decisions like whether to open the vault door, how to handle the mole rat infestation, and whether to trade with outsiders. The vault represents what pre-war America claimed to value: community, democracy, education, and also mutual support, making it a thematic counterpoint to almost every other faction in Fallout 4. The Railroad Synth Relocation Network Geography. The Railroad doesn't just wipe synth memories and then release them randomly. They also have a sophisticated relocation network with specific safe destinations, and the game tracks where every freed synth ends up. If you complete enough Railroad missions and then explore thoroughly, you can actually encounter relocated synths living peaceful lives in remote settlements, farms, and even as traveling merchants. Each has a hidden character flag identifying them as Railroad rescued, and while they won't reveal this directly, they have subtle dialogue differences that hint at their past. Some will nervously avoid discussions about the Institute. Others will show unusual knowledge about topics synths would have been programmed with. Most remarkably though, there's a hidden network of Railroad safe houses that aren't marked on your map, but exist as fully modeled locations. These are small, isolated cabins and homesteads where synths are temporarily housed during memory wipe recovery periods. If you discover these locations through exploration, you'll find evidence of recent habitation. You'll also find medical supplies, and sometimes freshly wiped synths who don't remember their own names yet and can't even explain why they're there. The Railroad's network extends far beyond the Commonwealth's borders too. Terminals reference relocation to New York safe zones and Western settlements, suggesting a continental network. This creates the implication that the Railroad is far more powerful and organized than they appear, with the Boston chapter being just one cell in a massive underground operation. And there we have it, a ton of Fallout facts that I generally believe most Fallout fans have never heard, or at least never heard all in one place. What I love about this series is that the deeper you dig, the more intentional everything turns out to be. The jokes have history behind them, the villains have real-world blueprints, the mechanics have cut content underneath them that changes how you see what actually shipped. Fallout isn't just a game about a nuclear apocalypse. It's a game that was made by people who cared deeply about history, about politics, philosophy, and the specific brand of optimistic dread that the 1950s carried underneath its chrome-plated surface. If any of these facts sent you down a rabbit hole, good, that's what the Wasteland is for. Drop a comment with the one that surprised you the most, and I'll see you in the next one. Stay irradiated.